Today, I'm going to talk about my recent experience of giving my first ever technical conference talk. So I'm just going to talk. I'm going to show a couple pictures. Basically, it was definitely an emotional roller coaster. I was anxious before the event, certainly before the event. To a certain degree, months before the event, you find out about 2 to 3 months that you're going to give a speech. So I was kind of anxious. But then when I actually had to pack, get on a plane, check into a hotel, my anxiety level definitely went up another level. And I knew that was going to be like that. And I wondered, how am I going to sleep? There was definitely a kind of a fear of the unknown. I haven't been to a conference in like 10 years. This was in another city, another country. The audience were not Americans. And the conference was held in a movie theater, which was kind of strange for me because I've never been to a conference in a movie theater. So definitely the anticipation anxiety was definitely exhausting to a certain degree. The conference was Dev Days Europe 2025, held in Vilnius, Lithuania. And I will definitely never forget it, largely because it was such an emotional experience, right? It's what's called emotional arousal, and that's why people remember, certain memorable things like their first kiss or car accident, or in this case, their first conference talk. Yeah, the emotions do make it more challenging, but on the other hand, it makes this experience unforgettable. This is just an example of the main stage. As you can see, it's in the movie theater. We got, pretty large movie theater, pretty large screen. It turned out to be really really a good place to hold a conference in the movie theater. You've got large screen, good sound, good lighting. They had lighting on the stage, as you can see from the shadows. They've got, professional lights. So when you're on the stage, you really see the lights in your face. All right, but let's talk about my preparation. So, of course, I knew I was going to be anxious. About 20 years ago, I did attend Toastmasters, so I knew about public speaking. I wasn't like a completely newbie, and I knew the best weapon against anxiety and fear of public speaking was preparation. Right, so I prepared. I started on my slide deck about 2 months before the conference. I had a rough draft done. And then 1 month before, I finished the deck and did 2 dry runs of my talk. I recorded the dry runs and I sent the recording to Fleet's co-founder, Zach Wasserman, and he kind of helped me with the slides and provided definitely invaluable feedback since he's got quite an experience speaking at conferences. And then afterwards, I feel like I did at least 4 more dry runs. And the talk was 1 hour, so it was just dry runs themselves were over 6 hours long because I went over. And I was tweaking things each time. But overall, it definitely, just the preparation of the slide deck and the practice took a lot longer than I expected. I'm used to kind of doing a quick blog post, doing one of these videos, it doesn't take that long, a couple hours. But preparing for a conference talk was definitely, 3-5x longer than that. So a couple things I noticed while I was practicing. One thing during practice, it was 1 hour, so I noticed my mouth was drying. And I also began losing my voice about 40 minutes in out of the 60. So normally I don't talk much during my typical day, spending most of my time coding. So I figured I just needed kind of more practice just to get accustomed to speaking for that long. And that's one of these things you see in these conference speakers. They're able to speak for long amounts of time, even extemporaneously. Another thing I noticed is with the 1 hour talk, I noticed I was getting tired partway through my talk. And I was kind of like, okay, next slide. And I was like wondering, man, this is, man, there's a lot of slides and there's still like 20 minutes to go. Wow. Whew. So I try to kind of motivate myself. I try to kind of write down and give myself kind of a pep talk of like to keep my excitement level up, right? So a few things I told to myself. I'm an experienced software engineer, and I like encouraging and teaching others, and this is what I'm doing, right? This is me, right? This is my thing. Also, the audience is like my people, engineers, people I want to talk to, I want to spend time with. So I'm excited to be there. Also, this specific experience, it is a brand new experience for me, like a once in a lifetime thing. It's only once in your lifetime will you give your first conference talk. So I should be excited. So coming in to Vilnius, as you can see, the airport is somewhat small, 700,000 people in that town, capital city actually, not town. So I missed my connecting flight in Frankfurt because the passport control was slow. And then I ended up arriving, about 5 hours later. But I kind of planned it out. I wanted to arrive early just to make sure I get acclimated to the city, I get some sleep. So I arrived Monday evening. The conference started on Wednesday, but speakers had a dinner Tuesday night. So I just made sure I arrived extra early and even accounted for a missed flight. The conference organizers were great. One thing that was great was they set up a WhatsApp chat for speakers. The chat was kind of very active, maybe even too active for me. People were discussing their arrival times, things to do around town, meetups. So it was great to just come into, a European city and have kind of sort of a community there already, a community of other speakers. All right, so on Tuesday, I slept pretty well. I was exhausted from travel. So on Tuesday, I worked a little bit. I practiced my talk. I visited, walked around town a little bit, visited a grocery store. So in the evening was the speaker's dinner. It was a restaurant called La Bohemie, I believe. There was a drinks reception. So, I started talking to other attendees, and the other speaker, almost all other speakers were from European. I only spoke to one other person from America, Dave. And I actually had a hard time understanding everyone's accents. And I was like a little bit freaked out. I was like, man, why did I apply to this European conference? I can't even understand these people. So I was kind of on the edge, I guess, emotionally. But, it just takes some time. After some time talking to people, you kind of adjust to different ways they have of saying words, and then it's fine. You can understand them just fine. One of the speakers I had a great time chatting with was Paul Conroy from Ireland, about AI and other topics. So it is like one of the top benefits of conferences, is chatting with other really smart people who are curious and passionate about new technologies and getting new ideas on them, getting feedback on the way you're doing things. Another great thing the organizers did is they organized a walking tour. So after dinner, I mean, it was already pretty late. It was like 9 p.m., but you can see this is like 9:30, but you can see it's still pretty light. So we had a walking tour of Vilnius Old Town. This picture is by the Presidential Palace. And this outing was kind of a great decision by the organizers, because I myself personally wouldn't have gone out of the way to go and do touristy things. But it was great to be with other speakers doing it. So I ended up getting to the hotel after 10 p.m. And the first talk was like 9 a.m. the next day. But I was like excited, energy running, jet lag. It was still like day in America. So I had real trouble falling asleep and sleeping. So I basically lie in bed most of the night, and actually only deeply fell asleep around 6 a.m. And then my alarm went off at 8 a.m. So I only got about 2 hours of deep sleep. Another thing that happened is, as the conference is starting up, some speakers can't make it. So in a conference chat, I saw some calls for anyone who had like a second talk to give, and that's not completely unexpected. This happens. Speakers drop out, and I had ideas for other talks, but I had nothing ready. However, what ends up happening is you have other speakers there who have given multiple talks at other conferences, so they already have talks basically ready to go. So other speakers who had presented talks before kind of jumped in and filled those empty spots. All right, I finally arrive at the conference, and it's just super intimidating, right? You've got all these professionals, all these engineers, mature, intelligent, technical people, hundreds of them. And I knew most of them were going to watch my talk because, my talk was the only one at that time slot. It was a keynote. So it was just like, just that thought that all these people over here, they're smart, intelligent. I don't really know any of them, and most of them are gonna watch my talk. It's just like, it just twists, twists my mind a little bit. Definitely intimidating. And the stage was also intimidating, right? I mentioned the bright lights and things like that. All right, so this is the morning, the first day of the conference. So I come in and to the main hall, and I sat down for the keynote. And there was many volunteers. There's an MC. They hired a professional for the main hall to kind of introduce the speakers. So they have an audiovisual technician in each room. They have videographers. They have, I think, multiple, at least 2 photographers. So it is like a well-oiled affair. It's very impressive. Much more impressive than any other conference I've been to as far as like preparation and all the technical things surrounding the conferences. So I'm there, I sit down, waiting for the keynote, and then suddenly kind of the lights dim, and then a male acrobat came out and started dancing on a pole, followed by a female acrobat. So there was basically a acrobat show before the keynote. And I was like, what? Where am I? This is something I was definitely not expecting. And also in the back of my mind, I was thinking, is there going to be a show before my talk as well? Because I saw the opening keynote speaker, Romano Ross. He was waiting and he was just watching the show. And I was like, wow. It's like something I didn't expect. Right, so the opening keynote was great, and I noticed Romano, he was using the laser pointer and the clicker to advance his slides, and I was thinking, wow, I didn't even think of that. I didn't think of, bringing a clicker. Another speaker mentioned that typically presenters usually bring their own clickers to conferences, and that's just, you present with a clicker. You don't use your mouse or your keyboard. You got a clicker. Yeah. Okay, so my talk was actually on the next day. So Wednesday was the first day of the conference. My talk was on Thursday. But on Wednesday, there was a panel that I was participating in, right? So a few months ago, after my talk was accepted, the organizer asked who was interested in participating in panels. At first, I wasn't sure, like I already have my first talk. I'm already stressed enough. But I was gonna be there. I'm gonna fly 20 hours there and back roughly. If I'm gonna commit, let's go for it. Let's try to get into the panel. So I signed up for a few panels. I ended up being on a panel, and it seemed to turn out well. In terms of the panel was on the first day, so I'd get to be acclimated to being on stage, and then my actual talk would be on the next day. So, like a good boy, I wanted to prepare for the panel. I wanted to know what I would say, and what questions would be asked for the panel. The panel was on computer architecture. However, that may not always be the case for the panels, because some panelists do like to prepare, a list of questions that they ask. Other panelists may more rely on the audience asking the questions, right? So in this case, I didn't quite know exactly what we were going to talk about, right? So I had a backup plan. But my backup plan was basically just don't talk too much, just occasionally say, yeah, I agree with my fellow panelists, something along these lines. Um, yeah, so the panel happened. Let me bring up a picture. The panelists got handheld microphones, and when the moderator, Kenneth Christensen, introduced me, I spoke into the mic, and immediately I heard like the loud movie theater speakers boom. So I knew right away my mic was on. That was just something you had to get used to. And I was nervous the whole time because it was like a job interview. I didn't know what the questions were going to be exactly. I didn't want to just sit there and not say anything. And my fellow panelists were extremely knowledgeable and impressive. There is Kenneth, the moderator, Romana Roth, Paul Dragunis, Alex Oliver. So I was certainly glad to be with, riding on their coattails there. Another picture here of me actually talking. So, I did say a few words. I did not have any long expositions. just making a comment here and there. So after the last talk of the session, I asked the audiovisual technician to kind of test my connection, because that's something you want to do at a conference, is just making sure you know how this stuff works. It ended up being pretty straightforward. They had a pretty good setup. There was a USB-C hub, so you would plug it into your USB-C port on your computer, and the hub connected to the external monitor and to the presentation clicker. So I found out that, there was going to be a hand clicker provided me, so I could change the slides with the clicker. Let me see if I have one. I had one somewhere. Anyway. So I was like, okay, I got the clicker. Yeah, I'm gonna look like a pro. At least I have a clicker. I'm not gonna be like pressing spacebar. There was also a monitor on stage, and you can see it in this picture down here. There's a monitor on stage, and this monitor shows what is shown on the screen behind the presenter. So you don't have to like turn around and look on the screen to see what's there. You see it here. So you see. So the back screen is duplicated, and then on your own laptop, you also have another screen, where your notes are for the presentation. So I was exhausted. I only slept 2 hours the night before. So unfortunately, something I do not recommend actually. Going to a Europe conference for your first conference talk because of the jet lag. I also kind of felt I missed out a little bit because I didn't hang out with the speakers that first conference day. After the first conference day, I just went to the hotel, took a sleeping pill, and I slept for 11 hours from 10 p.m. until 9 a.m. the next morning. Okay, so Thursday was when my talk was, and my talk was the last one of the day, the last keynote of the day. So just some background. So I've been in tech for 25 years. So why didn't I speak at a conference before? Well, the simple answer is that I felt like it never really made sense for me. It's more like my career and personal goals never really aligned with conference speaking. It was there. I was aware of it. I've been to conferences, but I never thought like the conference thing was the right thing to do at that level of my career, right? I was always chasing something that involved like changing what I was doing. I was always switching in some ways. Like I was switching from hardware to software and maybe different areas within software. I was trying to become a manager. I was trying to, have a side hustle, maybe a startup, or maybe some consulting going on. So I was always kind of hustling, doing different things. And, the conferences seemed like a huge, time sink in terms of like I have to prepare something. I don't have anything prepared. I just want to get things done. I don't want to like think theoretically about, something, something for the broader audience. And I also knew that, you had to, submit travel time, preparation, time away from work. So, it felt like conferences were, not quite for me. So what exactly changed, right? I feel like as I've grown up, I've gotten a bit calmer and more mature. So I also, to a certain degree, wanted to try it, right? I feel like I can do it. I'm not like afraid of it. I'm also like a senior software engineer at Fleet, so felt like getting external exposure seemed like a good idea. Plus, I've been writing a blog for over a year, so I had some content that I could basically repackage as a conference talk. Um, Let me show a picture of the hall, right? Like I said, this is a movie theater hall, right? So it's a little dark because it's actually it's actually a movie theater, but there's a light area here in the back where people were hanging out too. All right, so on the day of my talk, I put on a nice sweater that my wife packed by me. She said, "You're going to Europe, so you need to dress properly." Now, the day was not hot, but warm, maybe 70, high 60s in Fahrenheit. But it was humid. So, as I walk out, caught my Uber, I already started sweating. And then, I was riding in the car, the sun was shining at me through the window, and I was like, man, this is going to be terrible. So I actually like moved to the other side of the vehicle away from the sun, and the driver kind of looked at me, like, what are you doing? But, I ended up like basically sweaty most of the rest of the day. But, it's one of those things, something you just can't do much about it, so you just gotta roll with it. So my talk was the closing keynote of the day. So as I was watching other people's keynotes, another thing that I noticed they couldn't change was a lot of people were using dark background for their slides. They were using that dark theme. And from another presenter, I saw that dark themes are also great for laser pointers. If you want to point at stuff with a laser pointer, it's more visible if there is a dark background. But I use kind of the light Fleet template that we have, so I was like, well, can't do anything about that now. Let's roll with it. Maybe I'll update the slides for the next talk. So I was going to conference talks, but I decided to skip the one before my talk. So I was like, okay, let me decompress. I went to the speaker's lounge. It wasn't really nothing fancy. It was just like a separate area with some couches, and a lot of speakers went there. There were a lot of people were just working there, right? Some speakers, they give a talk and then they go work. So I just reviewed my slides, talked to my wife, and then I just kind of sat there and let the whole kind of experience sink in. All right. It's almost like this thing is live, and almost like time is your enemy, right? Like, okay, I'm ready to give my talk, but I gotta wait another 30 minutes. So it's almost like you're like fighting time almost. You're like, time. All right, so I finally went down to the main hall where I would be presenting. The volunteer greeted me. He kind of told me he'd like put up cards saying, there's 15 minutes, 5 minutes, ask me how much time I need for questions. And then he said that, you look pretty calm. And I was like, well, I prepared as much as I could. Can't really do much anything else at this point. I got my conference badge, my phone, everything in my pockets. I put everything away. The audiovisual technician put the Britney Spears mic on me. And so I was ready to go. Now, there was no acrobats before my talk, but there was like a game show. I didn't even know. I guess it must have been in the schedule. I didn't think to look, but there was a game show. So people, there was like 10 multiple choice questions, and people could vote with their phones. I mean, it worked pretty well. And I was sitting there and I was like, wow, I know like almost all of these. It'd be pretty weird if I was playing and then I won a prize in this show. And then the game was over and it was showtime. Let me show a pic. I noticed the professional photographers, they took like a lot of photos, like in the first maybe 20-30% of my talk. So this is maybe slide 3. But anyway, once they call you, it's time for action, time to let my practice take over. No time to think or to worry. I just got to think like, okay, practice, stick to the script. Don't forget to make some contact with the audience, like leave the podium a little bit. I left the podium maybe like twice, but I was still kind of tied to my speaker notes. Yeah, so the clicker may have been a mistake. I got the clicker in my hand right here. Basically, I was trying to use it to point stuff with the laser, but then every time I needed the laser, I would actually look down and be like, okay, where's the button for the laser? Okay. And I thought like it was fine, but another speaker, Mira Horacek, told me that he thought I was having trouble with this thing. So the lesson here is when you're practicing your talk, you should be practicing with the clicker, right? You should be like naturally pressing buttons. You should know where the buttons are. So about halfway through my talk, my nerves kind of calmed down, and it was weird how calm I became. Like I was anxious this whole time, like leading up for so long. I was very anxious, and all of a sudden, like halfway through the talk, it was like really calm. Like I was just having a chat with like another engineer next to me. It was kind of surreal. It was like, how can my brain kind of change states so quickly? Like I'm in front of this huge screen. There's like bright lights at me, blinding me, and I'm feeling just calm and just fine. Hundreds of people watching me. I believe this is often called settling in or stage comfort when you get to that place. So I finished my presentation about 5 minutes faster than any of my practice rounds, and afterwards I answered a few questions. Again, I'm not a big fan of questions because it's like an interview, you don't know what you're gonna get. And then I didn't quite understand a couple of them, so I asked the people to come talk to me. I don't quite understand this question, come talk to me afterwards. Another thing what happened is that I asked the MC to take some pictures of me. Because these professional pictures like this one were not going to be available right away. So I wanted to get some early shots so I can post on LinkedIn. But Ricky, he forgot. So after the talk, I got up on stage and he basically took a picture of me as if I was still talking. This big slide in the back of me actually says like the conference is over for today. All right, so I was pretty, after the talk, I was like high with excitement and relief, and there was an after party that day for the whole conference, and then I was standing in line for drinks, and several people made some positive comments, so that was great feedback, and I was definitely riding this post-performance high. It was, and just excitement and just relief. And it was a very nice high. I could see that it could actually be addicting, right? You purposely put yourself into kind of high stakes public events, and that afterwards you've got this post-performance high. Here's a picture from the after party with some fellow speakers. And then I also went out to dinner with John over here and Kale and Miro and had a great time. All right, let's talk about the last day and just general impressions. One thing that happened the next day is I attended a couple panels, and in the panels I noticed like normally they would present the slides if it was a talk, but in the panel there was no slides. So they had cameras, and then when one panelist would speak, their whole like close-up would be on this huge monitor behind them, and like I was sitting in the third row. I was looking at the panelist, and then right behind them, it was like a huge picture of themselves. It was like almost distracting. I was like, okay, it's a good thing I wasn't aware of that during my panel, or else I'd be like extra self-conscious. Um, so besides, listening to some great talks, a considerable value of the conference comes from talking to other smart people, right? Some people refer to this as the hallway track, and I've even heard some people going to the conferences only to hang out in the hallway, not even go to see the talks, which seems a little bit extreme. So I felt like being a speaker, it was like almost like a superpower. Like I could come up to another speaker and just start talking to them like, hey, when is your talk? What's your talk on? Did you have your talk already? Not. So there was like already some like, common small talk to get me started. So it was like, I felt like it was easier, getting out of the comfort zone, talking to other people as a speaker than it would have been maybe as an attendee. Also, if your talk as a speaker is earlier in a conference, then, people may come up to you later and like make comments about your talk. So that's also helpful. That's like an icebreaker. Hey, I heard you talk. It was really good. What do you think of this? Cool technical stuff. And people in general tend to be friendlier when they're in a new situation, such as a conference. So I think people at a conference are maybe more open to talking to others than they would be, in their regular day-to-day environment. Yeah, so it's not often that you get so much technical talent in one place. So it's really good to take advantage of it and talk to others. One conference attendee I had a great conversation with was Dmitro Sukaryev, um, who lives in Latvia now. And then at the end, we had like a conference speaker photo. That was kind of cool. We got all the speakers on stage and took a photo. That's it. Great stuff.